Hi, my name is Ryan Slobodin and I'm here with Aino Corry. Aino, you were recently recognized as a GOTO Distinguished Speaker. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was the first talk you gave at a Trifork conference?
The very first talk I gave was in 1999. It was in Aarhus in Denmark. It was back when the GOTO conferences were called the GOTO conferences because they were about Java and object orientation. And Christian Torp had made a track for PhD students where they had a possibility to talk about their PhD projects. And that's why I was invited to talk about my PhD project, which was the relation and the synergy between design patterns and the development of object-oriented languages.
How many conferences have you spoken at?
I don't really remember. I've spoken at academic conferences like UPSLA and ECOP, and I've spoken at QCon London, QCon San Francisco, JAU, GOTO in different cities, but I have no recollection of how many times. It must be at least 10.
So what do you like about giving talks at conferences? What are some of the benefits?
First of all, I really like to give talks. I like to be on stage, and I like that energy that it gives me, that surge of adrenaline. I really enjoyed it in itself. And I enjoy seeing people understanding what I'm talking about, seeing them being enlightened or intrigued or having questions. That sometimes I can answer them, sometimes not. I like that interaction with my audience. And then, of course, there are some side effects of speaking at conferences, which are that you're recognized, and when you're recognized, you get to do other things that are funny too. You get to give courses in different cities, you get to speak at other conferences, and people recognize you at the conference and would ask you questions, and you can have some very interesting discussions with people at conferences. So I think there's a lot of side effects to speaking at these conferences, and for the speakers who have a book out or something like that, it's fantastic marketing.
You also teach at Aarhus University?
Yes.
And how does conference speaking and teaching, how do they benefit each other? Are there things that are different for each? How do they relate?
That's an interesting question. How do they relate? Depends on what kind of teaching I'm doing, they're more or less related. I do lecture style teaching for first year students in Java programming. And one of the things that I need to do when I give a lecture is to grab their attention and motivate them to listen to what I'm saying and make them think. And for that I use the same skills as I do when I'm talking at conferences. I try to get their interaction, in trying to get an interaction with a bigger audience, more than 50 or 100 people, is the same as it is when you talk at conferences. You can get a hands up, they can use clickers or something like that. When it comes to the teaching in smaller groups, like I do a master's course in software architecture, where there are only 40 people, it's kind of different than giving a talk at a conference. That's more like what you do in the breaks after the talk, just talking to people on a one-on-one. So they are related, but it depends on the kind of teaching. But I also teach how to teach at the university. And for that, I think about a lot of the things that I use when I give talks at conferences. I spent a lot of time making retrospectives about how my talks go and what worked and what didn't work, and I can use those findings when I teach other people how to teach.
Some people say that the hallway track at a conference is often the best part. What are your thoughts on that? Like the discussions that come out of that, what are the benefits that come out of that?
The immediate benefits are, of course, that people have a good time talking to each other. But there are definitely long-term benefits of that too. I know that things happen when people meet and start talking. Sometimes I look at the conferences as the breaks, and that the talks are just the things that fill up in between the breaks. You know, the talks are just the thing that intrigues people to have something interesting to talk about in the breaks. So sort of turn it upside down and say that the talks are the breaks in the conference that takes place in the coffee breaks. And I know that things have happened at our conferences, that Rails was started. The thoughts about Rails were started at one of our conferences, for instance, and you can mention other things that started. Well, it could have started anywhere, but when you put interesting people together to talk about interesting problems, magic happens.
It's interesting when you look at conferences from that perspective, where it brings together a community. It's almost like there's multiple dynamics at work. On one hand, you're coming to learn about specific topics. On the other hand, you're meeting with this rich community of people that have this diverse set of experiences. And there's a lot of benefit to that too. I'm sure there's a question on the end of this, but I can't figure out what that is.
No, I got an answer for that question. I got an answer.
Okay.
So when we create the program for a conference like this, we used to think about what we thought people should learn from this conference. We thought about what they wanted to learn, but also what we think they should learn. But now that I've learned a lot more about learning and teaching, I understand that these presentations that they give doesn't teach people anything. People don't learn when they go to presentations. What they do is that they become motivated or intrigued, and then when they start doing things on their own, start programming in that language, or start reflecting about what took place, or discuss it with people in the breaks, that's where they learn. They don't learn while they're listening to somebody talking about something, but it might initiate some learning that they can do on their own.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that was a shock to me to understand that I can't teach anybody anything. So it changed my whole idea of how to teach, how to go about what to say, what to do.
What was your favorite talk that you gave at a conference?
My favorite talk was QCon London a few years ago, where I gave a talk about design patterns in functional languages. Ola Bini invited me to give that talk because he knew that I was into design patterns. He also knew that I wasn't programming in functional languages, but he thought it could be interesting to see me have a viewpoint on that too. And the reason why this was my favorite talk was that first it forced me to learn a lot about functional programming that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. Second, I was really afraid of doing it because I knew that there would be a lot of people from the functional programming field sitting there in the audience. A lot of the speakers were there, so I was terrified, and I knew it would be recorded on video, so well, I had to do well. It wouldn't just be forgotten. But the talk went well, and it was not just the fact that they laughed at my jokes in the talk that made it go well, but also that it spurred some interesting discussions, both on the internet at the InfoQ site where the video is, but also sometimes at conferences I still meet people who come up and ask me about it and whether I'm still working on it. And I have to say, unfortunately, no, every time I'm not working on it, but I think somebody should, and I think somebody are. So I liked it because I really enjoyed it. It was something I was afraid of, but I did it anyway, and I learned a lot from it, and it spurred some discussion, and I think motivated some people.